Okay, let's dive right into how finalRender supports matte shadow objects, how it's handled, and I'll bring up here my 3D Studio Max screen, and as we can see here, we have just a background image, and let me just show you how the scene is set up here so that you can get an idea what you're seeing here or what I'm trying to do here or show to you. So what we have here in the environment dialog, you can see we have standard JPEG. That's our background image. So there's nothing fancy or strange going on. So we have one background image. And if we were to render this scene, let me just render that with finalRender. So we have finalRender set as our production renderer, and we'll render this image, and you can see we just get the background screen. So there's nothing fancy about it. So what you want to do is with matte shadow objects is you want to add to existing photographs, you want to add artificial objects or lights or any kind of artificial change made to these photographs. And there are several options, several ways how you can do that, how you can add objects to a scene. And there's always some issues, some questionable effects where you think, oh, that might not work because the photo is already taken. And how do I fit something behind an object, or how do I put in transparent objects and all these strange things that can happen? And I'm going to show you how you can handle, for example, refraction or transparencies with our finalRender matte shadow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to activate an object we want to have, and I'll just activate it here. And what we have here is just a simple half of a cylinder, and we want to have this as kind of a loop effect or a glass lens, and we want to add it on top of the book. So what I did is I just put the object in here, and let's just have a rendering right now so we can see, okay, it's what we expected. It's this glass object put on top of the book, except that it doesn't look like it's a real like a loop or glass lens. It just straight shows the background image. And this is a common issue with matte shadow if you want to add transparent objects or refractive objects into an existing photograph. So you have to do a little bit of work with that. And also we don't have any shadows that fall onto the book and all this. So to solve this kind of things, you would create a plane that would work as a shadow catcher. So you have a shadow catcher plane, but the only thing you want is having the shadow there and nothing else. Everything else should be see-through to the background. And this is what I did with this plane here. So if I were to render right now, you won't see any difference at all, except maybe a little bit of darkening and shadow catching that's going on there. But besides that, no real change. So as you can see, our plane is fully transparent to the background and nothing else. So that didn't help us a lot. Just to make sure, I created this separate plane where I just made with the lattice the wireframe visible. So let me just render this again so that you know where the plane is, where I placed the plane, so that you can see, okay, there's an invisible plane at this spot. So what we are now going to do is we are going into the material editor and adjust how everything works. And you saw I press always render all the time. So I'm not willing to do that right now. I want instant updates. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting up my ActiveShade. And I'm going to set it up to 800. And let's just open, bring up our rendering here. So we have now our active real-time update. And as I said, I'm using here the full GPU+CPU rendering right now. Let's bring up the material editor. So we have this material, we have our glass material. Let's start with our FR physical material. We have an refraction going on. Here's our index of refraction. So we have a thick glass lens type of index of refraction here. So we should see some magnification here in our cylinder. How do we achieve that? And here we have our background image. And this is the magic material we have on our plane, this invisible material that, however, is able to receive shadows, it's able to create ambient occlusion shadows or contact shadows, and many other things. So the most important part is here, it supports a very special mode that says camera mapped background. If you assign a material there or a texture there, and this texture is set to texture coordinates, you can use camera mapping. And we do that. Let me just select the plane. What we did here, we put a camera map modifier on to the plane. So the mapping coordinates will match the view of the camera. So everything will be projected as seen from the camera. So that's the important little trick you need to know. So we did that with the plane. And the next thing we are going to do is we're going to use the same image. So I'm going to copy this image, our background image, and I'm pasting this in this slot, camera mapped background slot. So what we have now is, keep in mind, this needs to be texture explicit map channel because we have the camera mapping. So what we see now is the part on our plane that's here with the camera mapping. And when I render again, oh, it already updated. Sorry, I totally forgot that everything is updated right instantly. You see, now we have the effect we are after. So we have the effect of a glass lens or a loop, what we wanted to achieve here. And to show you that this is not a static thing here, I'm going to select the object and just move it around. So I'm going to move the object in the viewport. Let me just move it a little bit to this direction. And as you can see, as I move my object around, you can see the refraction is updated in real time. So this is the real life effect. We have everything here. So now the big question is, what happens if I leave my magic plane I've created here? We can do that as well. So as soon as I leave my plane here, we are going back to the straight non-magnifying effect. You can see nicely this thing here. And this is because our plane is using the camera mapping to get this effect working in the matte shadow object. So that's how the refractive objects can work with a photograph or a plate or screen, and how you adjust it. Let me just reiterate what I did here so that we get this lens effect working with the matte shadow material. All I did is in the camera mapped background slot, I have added the image with texture coordinates, the background image with the texture coordinates. And now the camera view is taken and the rendering, ray tracing is all done from the camera view, and it's all is properly magnified and calculated. So keep that in mind. We have this option in finalRender in real time. You can see live in real time how this magnification, how the matte shadow object, how everything here is working. Let me now move to another use for matte shadow object materials. They are mostly used or useful for architecture, for example, when you have an existing spot where you want to add a new building or add something else, a street, any extension or anything. This is very often used for it. Also for things like where you have a combination of an HDRI rendering illumination and you want to put a car on a road or on a parking lot or anything like that. So what I'm going to do here is exactly that. This is already a prepared scene with a pretty complex high-resolution car model in there. And what we are going to do is just render it in ActiveShade mode. What I'm doing here is I'm activating inside of the 3D Studio Max modeling viewport. I'm activating ActiveShade here, and this will give us the actual rendering with the background image with everything in here. And what you can see here is we have placed this car, so this BMW car is not real. The car here is in the photo. So what we are doing is, or what we did here with this scene is we added this car to the scene. And now it's actually the same deal like I did with the book. We have this plane, our road, and this road is actually has the material. Let me just grab the material from this object here. So this road is our matte shadow object material. As you can see here, this is our matte shadow object, and this matte shadow object has several options. As I already mentioned, you can get receive shadows and turn off the shadows. You can have the ambient occlusion working and all this kind of things. I think I didn't get the correct material. Let me just pick the correct material here so that we are in sync with our viewport rendering. Now when I turn off the receive shadows, you see down here in the rendering the shadows are gone. When I turn them on, the shadows are back. The same is true for the ambient occlusion. In this case, more of a kind of contact shadows. When I turn that off, they're gone. When I turn it on again, you see the ambient occlusion shadows. So the shadows close to the object will have a nice smooth fall off. And this is the shadow of our sun. Everything is easy and in real time you can see the effect, so that makes it really nice to integrate an object into an existing scene. And we could also do something like when this would be a wet street or road, we could have reflections and turn them on. Now we have the reflections visible here. So you have detailed control of what should happen with this material. And you can have the material or this invisible plane also receive indirect illumination or direct illumination, which you usually don't want to have because then it would look like this. But there's some situations where you want to have it also direct illumination maybe. Placing the car, there's several options. You actually have a real measurement of your camera. You know what camera was used, the position, viewing angle, and all this. Then you can dial in the numbers and use the physical camera in 3D Studio Max and with finalRender together, and you will get exactly the position and look of your camera. However, when I want to place an object, I'm usually lazy, and what I do is I just grab and move the camera around. You could usually use move your object around as well, so that doesn't matter but I'm lazy. I just move the camera. I don't care if the road is a little bit on the side. It even looks a little bit better, I think. And then just move back here. So as you can see, I can adjust it in real time. Now it's not the right scale. I'll just scale a little bit and move it this so that we place the car here. And as I said, I'm lazy. I just did that with the camera. You could do it in real and position the object away from the camera and have the correct camera like the photograph was taken. But it's up to you. It doesn't matter. I'm just moving around my camera and adjust everything as I like or as I want it, so that we can place the car maybe here for parking or rest. Again, here in this scene, not very complicated. We have a background image, and this image is also used to illuminate the scene and to get the reflections from the environment and all this. So what we did here is we have this background image, high resolution image, and I'm going to just say, okay, that's way too strong for my taste. I'm going to dial it down a little bit. So we increase the output here a little bit. So I'll reduce the output amount, so to bring down a little bit the background image and make it darker. No, that was too much. So something around here. And that's actually all you need to do when you want to integrate artificial object into existing photographs. You create your plane that is the shadow catcher or reflection catcher or whatever you want, and then you place your objects in the scene, adjust your camera. Hopefully you knew how the photo was taken and you already have a camera. Then you just adjust your objects or just adjust the camera until it looks right. And then you assign to your shadow catcher plane this shadow matte shadow material. And this matte shadow material allows you to adjust everything, and it will show the background. It will allow you to control the shadow and all this. If I wanted, for example, if the shadow is too dark, I can make the shadow a little bit lighter, as you can see here. Let's just move a little bit closer so we can play a little bit better with the shadow. Let me just let's move it on the other side of the road. Not picking the right option. So let's just move the car here. And as I said, by default, the shadow is pretty dark, or we can make it even black, which never looks good because you always have some indirect illumination things. So you can adjust your lightness or shadow intensity to make it lighter or to make it a little bit darker. So you have always full control of what happens with your artificial object, and you can integrate your artificial object in an existing photograph in a real easy, straightforward way. So to close this little tutorial I have here on the matte shadow object, I want to show you one other, a little bit more advanced use of the matte shadow material. But that reminds me, before I do that, let's go back to a much better reflection sample. So I just want to touch a little bit on the reflection and the support we have with the matte shadow object, and also how finalRender is integrated into 3D Studio Max so that all this stuff works. Let me just show you here what we've done. So in this scene we have this background image. Let me just bring up the background image. Oh, that's a huge image, really huge resolution, and it's squished right now, but that's my background image. So that's all I have to work with, and I want to integrate now some artificial computer generated content in this image. And in this image you can see we already have water there that creates a reflection. So that's a little bit of a challenge if we want to integrate something artificial in that scene. So what I created here is this plane or surface. This is my upper plate here. Let me just go back to full screen. This is my upper plate here. And that's my shadow catcher as well, and matte shadow material. And I have, let me go back here, another plane here. That's for my puddle, for my water puddle down there. And that's also a shadow, or in this case, a reflection catcher. So that should catch the reflection of my artificial object here. Before we go in here, let me select the camera and show you something, how it would look like when you render it without any perspective control. So when we are going to render this, you will see, and we have ActiveShade here, we now have the reflection down here. We can adjust the reflection and how the reflection is colored and how the reflection looks like. So with the glossiness, we can make it more blurry. We could use even a map in there to get some waves if that were not a flat surface. So it allows us to adjust the reflection here. And the same with the reflection color. I can just dial down the reflection color and the reflection gets more faint. And if I dial that up, the reflection gets a little bit stronger. So we have the reflection here down here. So artificially, we could create the reflection in the puddle. And the next thing you will see here is that we have this perspective issue of our camera. Because I didn't know how this shot was taken. I don't know what the field of view was or the focal length of the camera or whatever. I have no information, no data. So I would just adjust my camera, fiddle around until it looks like that my lower plate is aligned with this. But thank God, finalRender is integrated in 3D Studio Max. It's one of the best integrated renderers for 3D Studio Max. It supports really nearly every feature you can think of 3D Studio Max. So, including the physical camera. And this means we can use the tilt correction, for example, or a perspective correction we have here. And that will allow us to adjust our distortion the camera will give us. So I can play around now with my distortion. And the beauty of it, you see it in real time. So it's no more guessing work. Will the renderer actually do it? You just adjust it so that your lines are straight or look straight and aligned with this line, for example. And then you can adjust for any camera distortion. And as I said, I don't know how the image was shot. I just took it from the internet. It was a free background image you can get there. Just to explain, finalRender is so integrated. There's so many things that just work. None of, or not many renderers, especially GPU renderers, they don't support these camera distortion things or barely support it. In finalRender, you don't even think, you just expect it to work. And most of the times it just works nice and smoothly. Okay, so that's about how I did the setup here. So you get the feeling you can have multiple matte shadow objects there. Every object has its own purpose. So there's no restriction there. You can add as many matte shadow objects into your scene as you want, as long as you keep track and they are not overlapping and doing funny, weird things. Now let me go to a little bit more advanced use that could be even used with videos or animated sequences. I'm not showing an animated sequence here because the setup would be way too take too much time. But what I want to show you here is another thing I did. When we render, let me just move that here out of the way. When we render this, you see what I did here. So I have this post-it paper and I want the paper to appear underneath the thumb. But as you know, the background image is already done. So the thumb is on the picture. The book is there. So how can I fit something between that was not there and still have just one image? And with finalRender Matte Shadow, you can do that, and you can do that in a very effective, advanced way. So what I did here, I created two matte shadow objects. I created my thumb object here, this gray one, and I created, sorry, not a matte object. I created this post-it paper. It's just a standard plane. Could be anything. So I moved my matte shadow object in front of my plane so that you see. And let me just show you in the side view. So what we have is the thumb is in front of the plane, above the plane. And this will create the illusion when I render now. This will create the illusion that my thumb is above the post-it paper. Now, if we watch closely, we will have an issue, because when you look here, it's kind of a dirty trick I did here. It's very lazy rotoscoping. I just created this cylinder and tapered it. That is my thumb. And because I'm a really lazy person and I don't want to model everything or rotoscope or anything, I just used this cylinder. However, we can still enhance this lazy stuff I did there. When we go into our material, come on, material. We can go in there, and there's a separate option called mask opacity. So we can mask our matte shadow object, which is the cylinder, the tapered cylinder in there. We can mask it and control how the fall off or the transparency should work. So what I'm doing here is, let me just bring up the image so that you know how the mask looks like. So what I did here is I took the image of the background image and I masked out very rough and very lazy in Photoshop. I'm not a Photoshop specialist. I just masked out the thumb. That's all I wanted. And I wanted to have, when we zoom in to the edges, I wanted to have this little gradient so that it blends better with the surrounding. So when I activate now this opacity map, you will instantly see that the edges are now much smoother and it doesn't look cut off anymore. Without, watch the image here, and I've zoomed in here, so don't worry about the scaling of the pixels. It's just about, now I turn on the opacity and now you see the result is much cleaner. And for me as a lazy person, that's great and that's enough. You can use these masks in animated, so you can put that and have an animated set of rotoscoped objects, and then you can have this even animated. When he grabs the book, you can still put something underneath and it would work in the animation. The only thing is you have to have the mask as well, so you have to do proper rotoscoping and not like what I did here. But just as an idea, this is how you can use the matte shadow object material in finalRender. So I hope you learned something. This is all about what I wanted to show in this little tutorial about the matte shadow material. I hope you will enjoy it. There will be a recording, so if you watch this on YouTube or later on Facebook, thanks for watching this video. And there will be more videos coming about different materials and how you can use finalRender in an environment. So I'm going to shut down now the live stream. Once more, thanks for watching the stream. I hope you enjoyed. Get our free trial, and you can use the trial version to check out how great finalRender is and how interactive and fast it is. Thanks again.